I knew I was dying. Something inside me said, "Go ahead, die, sleep, become like them, accept it." Then, something else inside me said, "No, save the smallest part. It doesn't have to be much, just a spark. A spark can ignite an entire forest. Just one spark. Save it." These words by Charles Bukowski feel like a whisper amidst chaos. They are not a promise of instant redemption or a triumphant victory cry. Instead, they serve as a simple yet powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, something within us still resists. It's the smallest part, almost imperceptible, but it carries the potential to reignite everything that matters. How many times have you felt like this? As if something inside you was slowly fading away? It's not just physical exhaustion or fleeting sadness. It's that heavy silence that takes over, leaving you without direction. Maybe it stems from a loss, unmet expectations, or a routine that drains rather than nourishes you. The emptiness sneaks in unannounced, and by the time you notice, it has already taken hold. But emptiness isn't just an absence. It can also be a space that, while painful, forces us to pause and look within, like a forest devastated by fire. It feels like an absolute end, but it holds the possibility of rebirth. Bukowski reminds us that it doesn't take much to start anew, just a spark. Today, let's use this poem as a starting point to reflect on emptiness and what it teaches us about new beginnings. This isn't about offering ready-made or simplistic answers, but about exploring together how to find meaning even when everything seems lost. Because ultimately, saving the spark is about saving what's most human in us. The ability to keep going, to create, to transform. Emptiness is a universal experience, yet it's hard to put into words. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or grand explosions. It's more like a room that grows quieter and quieter until you suddenly realize all the sound is gone. When Bukowski speaks of dying inside, he captures this feeling with brutal honesty. It's not about physical death, but about losing connection with what once gave us purpose. Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, explores emptiness as one of the deepest crises of human existence. He calls it the existential vacuum, a state that arises when we no longer feel part of something greater. Frankl witnessed this in its most extreme form in the concentration camps, where, even amidst unspeakable suffering, it was the emptiness that truly drained the will to live. It wasn't the cold or hunger, but the feeling that nothing had meaning anymore. And emptiness isn't confined to tragic moments. It seeps into the small gaps of everyday life. Think of the person who works tirelessly but can't find satisfaction in what they do, or the student pursuing a safe career path, yet feeling that something essential is missing. It's the disconnection between what we do and what truly matters that makes emptiness so painful. But there's something important to consider. Emptiness, as unsettling as it may be, is also a state of openness. It's a space where old narratives dissolve and new possibilities can emerge. Frankl argues that even in the midst of emptiness, humans have the capacity to create meaning, he writes. Life never ceases to have meaning, even in seemingly hopeless situations. So perhaps emptiness isn't just a burden, but also a kind of invitation, a forced pause that compels us to look inward and ask, what remains within me, and what can be born from this space? If emptiness is already an inevitable part of the human experience, it becomes even harder to face in today's world. Contemporary society doesn't know how to handle pauses, silences, or spaces of uncertainty. We're constantly bombarded with messages demanding action. Produce more, achieve more, always be happy. But what happens when this constant motion hides a lack of purpose? Zygmunt Bauman, in his theory of liquid modernity, describes today's world as a place where everything is transient. Relationships, achievements, even the very idea of identity. We're always chasing something but never truly settling on anything. In this endless pursuit, the emptiness grows, because deep down, no matter how much we try to fill the internal silence, it always returns when the distractions stop. This is visible in many aspects of daily life. Think of someone who's perpetually connected to social media, scrolling endlessly in search of something they'll never find, or the professional who works more hours than they should, not out of love for their work, but out of fear of standing still. This constant motion, though it may appear productive, is often an escape. We run from emptiness because it forces us to confront difficult questions. Am I living in alignment with what I truly want? Or am I just playing a role I was told was the right one? The pressure to always be okay is another piece of this puzzle. Social media posts, motivational messages, and perfect filters suggest that if we feel empty, something is wrong with us. This pushes us to seek quick fixes, like consuming more, working harder, or distracting ourselves. But emptiness can't be overcome with speed. It demands pause, reflection, and, most importantly, courage to face it head-on. And this is where Bukowski brings us back to the essential. The spark he mentions isn't about impressing the world or meeting external expectations. It's about saving that smallest part that still belongs to you. But how can we do this in a world that seems to pull us further and further away from ourselves? Bukowski speaks of the spark as something small, discreet, almost imperceptible. And in a world that values noise, visibility, and grand achievements, saving that smallest part of yourself is a revolutionary act. Protecting something that isn't seen, that doesn't impress, but that carries all your potential, is a quiet form of resistance against a system that tries to mold us to fit in. Michel Foucault, in Discipline and Punish, argues that the most effective forms of control are not those that physically confine us, but those that make us believe we need to conform to external standards. Modern power shapes us internally, creating a constant pressure to be useful, productive, and validated. Saving the spark, in this context, is about rejecting this logic. It is about protecting what isn't visible to others but is essential to ourselves. In daily life, this quiet resistance is expressed through small choices. It's the moment you decide not to be consumed by the need to always appear fine. It's when someone chooses to turn off their phone and spend time in silence, even if it goes against society's relentless pace. Or when a person says no to a commitment that serves only to please others, prioritizing something that truly nourishes them. Instead, these acts may seem insignificant, but they are ways of rekindling the spark. They remind us that not every battle needs to be grand to be meaningful. It's like shielding a candle's flame from a gust of wind. It requires attention, patience, and, above all, the courage to swim against the current. But this resistance is not easy. It forces us to confront the discomfort of being different, of saying no to expectations that aren't ours. Bukowski challenges us to ask, what happens when everything around us tries to extinguish our flame? How do we protect what's left when the world seems intent on erasing it? Emptiness is not just an absence. It's also a space of possibility. But this possibility only reveals itself when we muster the courage to face the discomfort that emptiness brings. Bukowski speaks of saving the smallest part, and that smallest part is often what allows us to begin a process of rediscovery. It's not an easy task. Often, emptiness frightens us because it forces us to let go of old narratives and embrace the uncertainty of what lies ahead. Nietzsche, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, describes destruction as a necessary step toward creation. He suggests that to build something new, we must dismantle what no longer makes sense. Emptiness, in this context, is like the moment a house is demolished. Painful, confusing, but essential for something new to rise in its place in practice. This rediscovery happens through small, deliberate actions. It might be someone who, after a period of burnout, decides to slow down and look inward. It could be rediscovering a forgotten hobby, like painting, writing, or simply taking aimless walks. These small choices are ways to illuminate the emptiness, to begin rebuilding from what remains. On the other hand, rediscovery demands something even more challenging, letting go of what no longer serves us. Letting go isn't easy. It's like pruning a tree. It hurts to cut the branches, but only then can it grow back stronger. This process might mean abandoning suffocating standards of success, relationships that drain our energy, or even expectations we've created for ourselves. The void, then, is not merely a place of pain, but also a space where something new can be born. Bukowski invites us to look at that smallest part, that spark, as a reminder that there is always something that can be saved. The question that remains is, what are we willing to let go of to allow the new to flourish? Transforming emptiness into a fresh start is a process that begins with acceptance. Often, our first reaction to emptiness is to try to fill it with distractions. A new project, a relationship, or an endless list of tasks. But Bukowski and Viktor Frankl suggest something different. Before rushing to fill it, we must accept that it is there. Emptiness is not something to be ignored or fought against, but a space to be understood. Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, talks about how accepting suffering gives us the freedom to attribute meaning to it. For him, this quest for meaning transforms even the most challenging moments into something constructive. The same applies to emptiness. Instead of fleeing from it, we can face it as an opportunity to ask what it is trying to show us. This transformation, however, does not happen all at once. It is built through small actions. Perhaps it is starting the day with something simple, like opening the window to let the light in, or setting aside 5 minutes to write in a journal about what's on your mind. These actions may seem insignificant, but they are like gentle breaths fanning a nearly extinguished flame. They keep the spark alive, allowing it to grow. Another important step is learning to distinguish between what we need to carry and what we can leave behind. Nietzsche reminds us that destruction is an essential part of creation. Letting go of old ideas, expectations, or relationships that no longer make sense can be painful, but it is crucial for creating space for the new. It's like emptying a heavy backpack. Only by shedding what weighs us down can we move forward. Finally, transforming emptiness into a new beginning is a process of patience and self-compassion. It's not about finding quick answers, but about taking one step at a time, trusting that the spark, however small, is enough to light the way. Saving the spark is, at first, a solitary act. It's about looking inward and protecting what still lives within us, even if it's small. But Bukowski challenges us to think, what happens when that spark begins to grow? It doesn't just light up our own path. It also becomes a bridge to the world around us. Martin Buber, in his work I and Thou, argues that the meaning of life is not found in isolation, but in the authentic relationships we create. He describes the I-thou relationship as a true encounter, where we see the other as a unique being, not as an object or a function. Saving the spark, in this context, is the first step toward rekindling genuine connections that help us rediscover the meaning of living in community. In daily life, these connections can emerge in unexpected ways. It might be in a spontaneous conversation with a friend who listens without judgment. It could be in a smile exchanged with a stranger, or the support you find in someone who has endured a similar pain. These moments are like fuel for the spark, showing us that even in the deepest periods of emptiness, we are not truly alone. But connection is not automatic. Just as we shield the spark from strong winds, we must also choose carefully where and how we share our light. Not every space or person will be ready to embrace our vulnerability, and that's okay. What matters is finding those few thous, as Buber would say, who help us grow without extinguishing our flame. In this way, saving the spark is no longer just an internal act. It expands, reaching others, and transforms both our lives and those around us. It's a reminder that even in the hardest moments, authentic connection can be the key to rediscovering meaning and purpose. Saving the spark, as Bukowski suggests, is a small but deeply meaningful gesture. It's not about making drastic changes immediately or finding all the answers at once. It's about protecting what still pulses within us, even when everything seems to be falling apart. Viktor Frankl reminds us that as long as we have a purpose, we can still find meaning in life. Nietzsche teaches us that emptiness, though painful, can mark the beginning of something new. And Martin Buber emphasizes that it's in authentic connections that we find the strength to carry on. And there's something even more important. As long as there is life, there are possibilities. No matter how many times you've fallen, how many paths seem closed, or how many doubts you carry, you can still reinvent yourself. You can still start over, even if the next step feels small or difficult. The spark is proof of this. It doesn't need to be big, but it can grow, illuminate, and transform everything around you. If you feel like you're at your limit, remember this: you are capable, no matter how small that flicker inside you may seem. It's enough to reignite your strength, to create new meaning, and to turn emptiness into possibility. And you are not alone on this journey. Believe me, I believe in you. You have what it takes to protect that smallest part and discover what can still bloom. As Bukowski reminds us, it doesn't have to be much. Just a spark. A spark can ignite an entire forest, as long as that spark exists, and it does exist within you. New beginnings are always possible.